I want to get into that a lot deeper at another time. The metaphysics of the colors, red, black, and green. And what those colors meant to your ancient Kemete'u, not Egyptians, Kemites, but the Kemete'u peoples, and how they recognized what melanin was from a pictographic understanding, a deeper, more sublime understanding or overstanding and inner standing of this thing, of this principle, of this activity that we have consolidated into form and called melanin. I want you to just put it down for the history, like Brother was saying, that, I don't know, I have 7 books that I'm writing at the same time. And I find that all things cycle into the one, but there are many in diverse colors. For lack of funds, I have not had the chance to sit down and complete them. But I just want you to know, as I showed you the book Wounded Womb, as I showed you the book on herbs, I also want you to show that there is actually a working matrix called Melanalysis, the Metaphysics of Dark Matter Consciousness. It is in the works. I have I've been given many offers on the Wounded Womb, but the Wounded Womb is a special book for me. It's actually book 3 or 4 in the series, and I finished that one first. Book 1 is called The Microcosmic God, which is the truth around the distillation process that became man. Book 2 is the Melanalysis, the Metaphysics of Dark Matter Consciousness, and how man became. Book 3 is Neogenesis. Book 4 is The Wounded Womb. Book 5 is the Epicene Enigma, the secret behind the phenomenon called homosexuality. Book 6 is a book called The Ebers Papyrus, or The Ebers Unveiled. Ebers Unveiled is one of my favorites because it shows that that so-called first book on medicine was actually a book that was given to man at that time, burgeoning man, as a book with formulae to help with radiation burns. There was a great war during the time that that book was written, and the people who took the book, who were lacking in melanin, did not understand its import at the time they were doing the translations. You had a medical mind trying to understand what a homeopathic mind was actually delineating. And the Ebers Papyrus, when they showed you the parts that they took of insect parts, of taking poisons for lead for the eyes and then using another specific type of potion to get rid of the poison, they were actually practicing the highest science of homeopathy at the most difficult time that the planet had gone through in our consciousness time zone. There was a great nuclear blast over Chem that took out all the forest, all the trees, everything else, and turned it into the desert land that you saw. Chem was not a desert, never was a desert. There's no place that our people would ever put up in a desert. The same thing that happened on Mars when the regressives began to attack there, when they took back in time and came there and attacked. And actually, the one that you know as Ptah, the officer called Ptah, is buried within the face that you see there on Mars. That is his tomb. And his mother, or the mother principle that guides all things, that is supposed to be a radiated principle, once we spied that particular face, that would then trigger a race consciousness within the melanin. And it has. It has, it has. That's why they are doing this serious, regressive, demonic ritual at the pyramids on the 31st of December to intercept the Orion 9 energies. The 9 energies is for the establishment or for the locking in of melanin energies to the right vortex. What they're trying to do is to set up a 6 vortex. And in setting up the 6 vortex, they're trying to intercept the 9 vortex, which is to awaken certain crystalline lattices within the melanin molecule. And they are going to triangulate, and they're not telling you the truth behind it. The truth behind it is they are going to triangulate to all the pyramids on this planet. Not just the major pyramid, but all the pyramids on this planet. And they are going to set up a force field to try to intercept the Orion, or what you know as Osiris constellation, or the Osirian constellation. And if we do not set up counter thought processes, counter thought energies, like Dr. Delbert Blair says, the melanin molecule, which is God in the physicalized form, or God's programming of itself within this consciousness time zone, will be intercepted, and there will be a great breakdown in the consciousness matrix that is supposed to be established for this time. So I just want you to understand and understand that during that time, we must set up some form of a force field, if not just in your home, burn certain sages, listen to music that is of your own ancestral drums. I suggest drums played by indigenous or melanated peoples during that time will set up a frequency that will entrain the heart, because the heart has the seat of the soul. The seat of the soul is not around the pineal, but they have found that there is a valve inside the heart where the soul itself sits. So we have to regulate the soul's energy by regulating it through the drum. That is why the drum was used as a healing modality for us as people. And as such, the drum sets up a synchronicity with the heartbeat. If you are sick, the medicine person or the medicine woman, the medicine man, beats the drum in synchronicity to lock your heart into that particular rhythm, and thereby, in syntonic relationship, keep your heart going through a psionic, a kind of a projection to you of that healing. That is exactly what we are supposed to be doing with our own melanated selves. The music that is being played, the ultra-high frequencies from harp and all other forms of high-level, high-frequency, different types of radiated modalities that melt light. See, that's a concept everyone doesn't understand. About 1974, they finally revealed that back in 1932, Einstein and about 5 others, Tesla, went into a specific grave that was dug up in Greece and found a papyrus there that showed a specific place in the pyramid that never existed before. What they found down there was the formula for liquid light. Now, these are your ancestors. This is melanin operating at its highest frequencies. Now, I cannot and will not go into the psychobabble that has been given to us around melanin. If we lock ourselves into that paradigm, we will constantly follow the rich programming that they have set inside the so-called miseducation system. There is a rich programming that comes with the consciousness that's being given to you. Rich programming is using the outer field of your aura and to set up harmonic implants that will intercept certain energy frequencies, distort them. Because when you are in your perceptive modes, your aura shoots out into the darkness, into the dark matter. And as that light becomes back to you, just like tides, as you perceive things, as you begin to think things, as you begin to extend that which is you, the you that you are, a light shoots out from you, and then the information informing, or that which is of the dark matter that matches itself through the light being emanated from you as your aura, comes back to you in the form of a light inspiration to in-breathe. So as that light comes back, as you sit and contemplate, and that light shoots out and then comes back, you are inspired by what your ancestors give you as your field of operation, consciousness operation. Well, they have a way of setting up rich programmings It intercepts that. Now, in melanalysis, I speak about dark matter consciousness, but I have to first do the preliminaries. Because after I have given you the Western context for melanin, and I have used certain principles around what it is that they tell you it is, I am now going to give you the hypothetics of melanin based upon what the left brain found. It is time for a right brain understanding of melanin, not just from what our great teachers have given to us in the form of information left by our Kemetu ancestors, that it was the black dot, that it was the center of consciousness, that it was the center of this and that. How did it happen? What is melanin? Maybe we need to just get rid of the term, because the term means nothing to what the thing is. It consolidates it into this coffin constructed of letters and words. It has died in the meaning that they have given to you. The word melanin comes from the word melano or melan, which means dark. It's Latin. Right away you understand what I mean by dark matter consciousness now. The Greek, it comes melas, which means black. Now, melanin is a dark pigment found in the skin, retina, and the hair. This is your Webster's dictionary. How many of you saw my dissertation on the mathematics of the beast? And we told you what Webster's dictionary came up to, did it not? The word Webster came up to 666. So you understand that the beast has you in a carbon lockdown. Because that's essentially what it is. 666 is nothing more than the carbon molecule. So what they're doing is keeping you in the beast field. Not in the spirit field, but in the beast field. Melanin is dark matter pigment for the skin, retina, and hair. Melanic, of pertaining to or exhibiting melanism. Now listen to this. Afflicted with melanosis. Afflicted with melanosis. What is melanosis? Abnormally dark pigment of the skin or other tissues, resulting from sunburn and various dermatosis. So obviously melanosis has nothing to do with us. Because I see some unusually and abnormally dark people compared, right here in this room, compared to the definition. Melanoid, black pigmented, afflicted with melanosis. Melancholy. Sadness or depression of the spirit. Listen to how the light code locked down through your semantic prison and how they manipulate light. And it's funny because next week in Atlanta, I'm going to wear them out with the fact that light is a tangible, accessible, moldable thing. So if light can be molded into a feeling, then they have now taken that feeling and called it melancholy. Check this. Sadness or depression of the spirit. Gloom. Pensive reflection or contemplation. A black bile. That's a separate reference. A black bile. That's what melancholy is. An emotional state characterized by sullen outbreaks of sudden rage believed to arise from black bile. Melanism. They go back. Melanism is melanosis, darkness of the skin, hair, or eyes, resulting from high pigmentation. Melanocyte, an epithelial cell capable of synthesizing the black pigment melanin and responsible for color variations in the skin of humans and animals. Melanocyte stimulating hormone, a hormone secreted by the pituitary gland that stimulates melanocytes or melanophores to dispense melanin. a melanophore, is a chromatophore that contains melanin. All of these are going to mean something as we go along. And I told you in Matrix what chroma means. Chromatophore is a pigment-containing, pigment-producing cell, especially a pigment-containing animal cell, that by expansion or contraction can change the overall color of the skin. Now, the chromatophore, or the chromatic in music, if anybody understands music, you understand what the chromatic is. It is a harmonic change or a movement to another power. So when you're speaking about a chromatophore, if it is capable of changing the overall color of the skin, then color being life, color being a byproduct of life, it means that that has a distinct connection to consciousness and intelligence. And that it is a controllable instrument. Because if the lizard can change colors, the chameleon can change colors with its chromatophores. Why is it that a lowly lizard can do that and you cannot? Why is it that a lowly turtle can live 500 years and you drop dead at 60? What is wrong, or what has been pushed out of phase about us as people of color? What is it? Melanochroi, Caucasian peoples having dark hair with light complexions. Also, melanochroi, Greek melan, dark, acros meaning pale. This is where the words break down. Now, first, let me explain the use of dark matter. The term dark matter as used in this context, not in their context, because they will try to investigate dark matter till the cows come home, and they will never understand or overstand what it is that that term was that was given to them. I call it the Seshet Kemur, which is our own ancestors' sound vibrations for the description of that thing. The term dark matter is used, or as used in this context, deals not, or does not refer to a substantiation or qualification of some form of subtle matter. It is an attempt to rarefy an aspect of divinity. It is my attempt to rarefy an aspect of divinity, to make tangible that which is untouchable by science or semantic definition. Science presently sees, or more appropriately looks, at what amounts to being an impenetrable surface revealed to them through the lens of their ever-growing, ever-specializing technology. The more specific the modality, the more inaccessible it becomes to the subtle organics of corporeal and incorporeal existence. That's what I spoke about when you deal with the external Merkaba. Such is the study of melanin. To science, dark matter is as yet an inaccessible territory of existence that completely eludes their intellectual colonization. The same is true for melanin. This is the reason I have made the association between melanin and dark matter, because both are as yet inaccessible and inexplicable to the precise degree by any mode or method of science. Now they will tell you what it is that they see around the fringes of that thing. Because it will keep melting in their hands. It will keep disintegrating under their touch. At this point, therefore, it is anybody's guess what the higher functions of either phenomenon truly are. Everything must be considered speculative. Although science has narrowed the perceivable mechanisms of melanin down to its organizational capabilities, its archetypal purpose or its more arcane or occult purpose remains a mystery. To understand the mystery of melanin as dark matter consciousness, you cannot simply study it as an effect. You must understand its metaphysical motivations. Its metaphysical motivations, its archetypal intent based on the realms of cause. You cannot study melanin as an effect because it is a dynamic of cause that continues to refine itself. It will never stop at the particular point that it expresses itself, because it is an ever-changing dynamism that follows intelligence. The reason why your melanin is in lockdown now, because your intelligence factors are all in stasis. The modalities and the potential of melanin has been put into stasis. It is Osar wrapped up, Osiris buried. The brother Set that had taken melanin and destroyed it, broken up into 50 pieces. Melanin as a molecule no longer has its wholeness, so you can never see what melanin is. The body of Osiris still lies in 25 different places. We're still searching to put that body together. Well, the body of Osiris is in the melanin. It is in the lattice. It is in the matrix. Science presently states that melanin, or neuromelanin, in conjunction with other pigment molecules such as see, they put these words here just to mess with you. Isopentanoids functions as an organizational molecule for all and in all living systems. Melanin is therefore considered an organizational trigger capable of using established properties such as photons. Listen to what I'm saying to you, beloved brothers and sisters. Photons. What are we talking about? Light. Capable of using such properties as photons, electrons, phonon conversions, or free radical redox chemicals, ion change mechanisms, and semiconductive switching capabilities that direct energy to strategic molecular systems and sensitive hierarchies of protein enzyme cascades. Now I can explain the whole damn thing what they're saying to you, but all they're saying is that I don't know what the fuck melanin is. All I know is that by this, there are important factors that have to do with melanin. Without melanin, shit don't happen. That's what they're saying. In my book, I do break down, by the way, everything that they're saying there into its component parts. I diagram the sentence for you so that you can actually see where the subject, the object, and the verb, and the adjective, and all of that is about. But here right now, I want to get right to the meat of the matter. Science fails to realize that melanin is not just an organizational trigger capable of utilizing established properties such as phonons, photons, electrons, etc. Melanin is photon. Melanin is electrons, neurons, nuons, and phonons. The problem with Western science is they think that what they see in the distinctions of phonons and so forth is different from the melanin that they're observing. It is not. Melanin is that. Melanin are these properties. And the ambient wave energies that they use, the way that melanin as an intelligence brings these particular things together, is the intelligence, the germ, the river Nile rubbing right down in the middle, calling forth the life. The fragmented perceptual model of Western research science translates the activities of the effects that are seen into the modus operandi of the cause unseen. They believe that melanin organizes because of the effect this etheric intelligence, this dark or unseen intelligence in matter enlists. But melanin is intelligence, the intangible dynamic of divine mind that gravitates or organizes unseen elemental compounds of light into what is discerned as the geometric lattice or matrix that frames the omniscient intent into natural substantiality. That was from me, not from them. This is why science cannot study the material husk or representation of what they identify as melanin, because as soon as they get it into the lab, dissect it, dismember it, or destruct it, it disintegrates. Without its gossamer threadings that connect its byproduct to the divine intent of universal mind, it becomes a lifeless shell that confounds the priesthood of Western medical research. Every time they try to touch it, it disintegrates in their hands. It was not meant to be touched, it was meant to be felt. Right away, our understanding or overstanding of melanin changes when we stop looking at it as this deficient or defunct color that we have. And I'll explain that later. This is not melanin. It no longer has the light glowing from it, the light that made you the hue in the hue man. This is not your indigenous melanin, the one you transduced as life into this corporeal body, the one that you distilled yourself into as intelligence. This is not melanin. So studying this is an exercise in futility. And I say that with all humility to the teachers that went before me, because they blazed the way. Another chemical definition or another clinical definition states that melanin is capable of regulating a wide range of molecular interactions and metabolic processes, primarily through its active or effective control of diverse covalent modifications. All it's telling you is that it has properties that enlist the action of other properties to do functions not directly connected to it. Which means melanin ain't just your skin and your face and your body. Now listen carefully. In my investigation of the clinical data related to melanin, such as given above, I have noticed that there is an almost contrived absence of information about melanin being what I consider as a biological interfacing mechanism to more higher, subtler densities and dimensions of awareness. Melanin falls into the occult or metaphysical realms of subtle body phenomena. Why is it that the European who are in the New Age, answer me this, how is it that they are now taking all of our ancestors' information, distilling it, dissecting it, homogenizing it, watering it down, and giving it back to us, and still not giving praises and due thanks to the fact that it was melanated people that put this together? Where is the outrage at this whole New Age movement over this thing called racism? That is a psycho-spiritual tumor that lays on the consciousness of this present humanity, and they are as yet to address that. If you are so much into New Age, then the New Age cannot begin unless there is reparations, not even a thought or a reaction to the old age and where you were at that time and what you played into. How dare you pimp the legacy that came from our dark matter consciousness, take it, pervert it, use it as yours, and then not give it back to you? You're going to perish for that. We must not only study the interfacing physical components that weave together the atomic structures of intelligence, but also the very intelligence that does this. Again, we must not only study the interfacing physical components that weave together the atomic structures of intelligence, but we must also study the very intelligence that is able to do this. And its divine primal intent, motivation, and ultimate reasoning. Again, conspicuously missing from all scientific data is the motivation of melanin. Let's sit with that for a minute. The motivation of melanin. Why is it organizing? Why is it using photonic charges, muons, and protons? Why is it using these things? The study of melanin has not had anything to do with the fact that it has pigment, that has to do with intelligence. What is the motivation of melanin? What is the intelligence? What is the divine dynamic? Why does it organize? It is, they say, the organizational molecule that lays the foundation or infrastructure conduits that channels or focus the various frequencies of sensual intelligence to biological entities. If this is the case, then it is truly a mechanism of miracles, and as such should be studied as voraciously and as tenaciously as we do the Bible. Let me say that again. If this is the case, then melanin is truly a mechanism of miracles. If it organizes practices and does everything that they say at the subatomic level. Why are we not making this something that they teach the children from primary school? And as such, it should be studied as voraciously and as tenaciously as do the Bible for the average man and the average woman. We study the Bible to hell. We tear that to pieces. We rip it apart and we study every line. We don't know what the hell it is. But we got preacher pimp taking it apart. Old low blow, crep blow. Pimp a dollar. In a treatment and study conducted by the Institute for the Study of Consciousness, I found literally hundreds of references given to the research of melanin. This was graciously given to me, by the way, by Dr. Ann Brown. The researchers found that neuromelanin is capable of self-synthesis. In other words, it needs no other activant or adjuvant to bring it to life, to cause it to do. This means inherent intelligence, the capability of self-regulation and self-correction. They also found that melanin may, one, possess two melanocentric systems, key molecular systems in which melanin plays a central, if not controlling role. Two, they say that melanin may have a role in embryological organization and tissue repair regeneration by way of sustained or direct current. Sustained or direct current. We use the word current. What are we talking about? Electricity, light, energy. All this is considered in addition to its possible control of the major homeostatic regulatory systems. That is, the autonomic, neuroendocrine, and immunological systems. That means the immunological systems as well as the autonomic and neuroendocrine systems are under the control of melanin. Why do you think they're spraying? Whoa, John. If melanin has direct connections and electrical pulses that connect it directly to these functions, the autonomic, neuroendocrine, and immunological systems, it would mean that an attack on this particular thing called melanin would be the component to destroy the genetic base for intelligence in the new species of melanated peoples. To stop us from taking the quantum leap to our next inheritance in the flesh. To trap us here to become closets for walk-ins. To become closets for people who want to change clothes. You being the clothes. The extraterrestrials now know, and all of these reptoids and reptilians know, and they already stated that they cannot use the blood or to become part of the blood of the indigenous peoples of this planet. They can only use the purebred, they call them, the white or pale, blue-eyed blonde. That means the only way that these reptoids and these other mind-controlling entities who come from other dimensional vortexes, they have to go down to come back, and they can't get back or pierce the veil of their own consciousness ceilings. They are coming back to use you because you are the ones who fell the deepest, the furthest. Therefore, you're going to raise the highest. Wow. So your vehicle is going to be used. And these reptoids know that they cannot deal with the indigenous children of the sun. Why? Because the indigenous people from this consciousness programming is insulated by the programming that was given to this consciousness vector. You are insulated, so they had to water you down and then hybrid you. The way they would terraform or they would breed piebald cows, the black and white ones you see as LC. That's a hermaphrodite cow. And what else did they change us into except hermaphrodites and piebald people? This poisoning of the atmosphere is an acclimation process for them. To destroy your atmosphere is to create the weakness in you necessary to create the strength in them. And until you understand that, and do like Brother Delvin is talking about, getting these particular things, everything we need right now to help us in this battle. Because it's not a battle with guns anymore. Pretty soon, when you understand the secret of vibrating the body and then turning at 90-degree angles, you can disappear. You ain't got to worry about them. They don't worry about you. Thus, by previous definitions, it would seem that melanin is an intricate component and the most essential factor to the processing and synthesis of biological life. By its very ability to synthesize light by way of photon-electron-phonon conversion, as well as ionic exchange mechanisms and semiconductive switching capabilities, it would seem that melanin is an encoded light fixture of interdimensional biospiritual consciousness. Let me say that again. Just like this. It's a light fixture. Melanin is a sublime gossamer light fixture, because the only way you can fix light is through and keep the properties of the life of the light is through a gossamer instrument. And by gossamer, if you understand gossamer, gossamer means very ethereal, very light, almost feather thin. The only way light can actually conduct the intelligence of dark matter consciousness into 7-band light spectrum consciousness, which is what we operate in today, is through the gossamer filters that then become the intelligence conduits for melanin's intelligence and organizing capabilities. Light is the substance that gives form to the word. Listen carefully, children. Light is the substance that gives form to the word or frequencies of infinite mind. If science tells us that melanin is a light synthesizer, a photon, electron, phonon converter, then in occult science, that which is identified as melanin is the lattice or matrix that divine intelligence constructs so that it may house itself within the corporeal temples of flesh. Melanin has to be the framework of intelligence, the multilineal lines of demarcation that traces the encoded instructions that are transmitted through light codes to our consciousness time zone by way of Merkaba programming that constructed our 3D reality. Let me say that again. Melanin has to be a framework of intelligence, a multilineal line of demarcation that traces the encoded instructions that are transmitted through light codes to our consciousness time zone by way of Merkaba programming that constructed our 3D reality. The Merkaba programming is the seed that comes from the central core galaxies that creates, that ejaculates the intent into the darkness, into the womb, into the vagina, into the throbbing, wet, juicy vagina of dark matter. Melanin has to be a construct of universal synergistic code. Melanin has to be a construct of the universal synergistic code, that empathic, listen carefully, children, we're going to redefine everything. The empathic, cohesive harmonic, listen carefully, that empathic, cohesive harmonic that we define three-dimensionally as love. New word for love. A new phrase for love, because love can no longer contain what has got to come through as love. We've abused that word. That word, the social consciousness, has love in pornography, has love in everything else but what love is. So we have to change the syntax. We have to change the consciousness realization and our definition of it. So I call it the empathic cohesive harmonic, because it attaches us to the higher. It keeps us empathically connected, and it is a harmonic. It constantly grows. It constantly defines itself each time you strike the chord. Each time you make love, each time you are love, each time you show love, you release disease. It is because you hold on to so many doubts, so many regressive thoughts, that you don't give love unconditionally, that your melanin stays in stasis. They have taught you how to hate. They have taught you how to ignore suffering. And that is what awakens melanin. If you do not understand that the empathic, cohesive harmonic is what distills melanin into what it is that the Most High Father Mother wanted to give birth to, then you will stay here locked in as light code lockdown slaves. For the regressives, those of the Lucifer matrix who broke away from the original intent of Lucifer, that was to reveal evil by being in light. That was Lucifer's original intent, to take the light, to synergize it into the darkness, to invaginate, and thereby his existence with all the rest of those who agreed to fall into dark matter, to fall into the lowest depths of matter, and to reveal the intrinsic evil that was in that thing that he worshipped as God. The first thing, he was the first dissenter, the first rebellious, the first rebel. That's who Lucifer was. He taught you to question. You don't take authority at their word, rather to rule in hell, to serve in heaven. That had a greater import than we know. But here was Christianity and everybody telling you, don't listen, don't study Lucifer. You need to study Lucifer. If you understood who Lucifer was, you wouldn't be running so far. You wouldn't be going back to that damn church. Because the demons run that. The above characteristics of melanin make it an information processing instrument, or more precisely, a decoder of white light. Melanin is a vectorizing system for the transduction of light into specialization as biospiritual consciousness. I got to put it all down now. You can study the tape. As melanin becomes blood, listen carefully, children. As melanin becomes blood, which is a rarefied differentiation of light. Listen carefully, children. As melanin becomes blood, which is a crystal, the liquid crystal. This is why the crystal is going to work. As melanin becomes blood, which is a rarefied differentiation of light, it diffuses consciousness programmings encoded within that light as instructions for the dimensional behaviorisms of the DNA, the chromosomes, electrons, neutrons, quarks, muons, in essence, coordinating the macrocosmic intent of the infinite mind into microcosmic reality. Melanin delineates the characteristics of omniscient being into the corporeal characteristics of material becoming. Let me say that again. Melanin delineates the characteristics of omniscient being, gives you its intent, its personality, delineates omniscient being into the corporeal characteristics of material becoming. So without melanin, being could never become. Understand and overstand, melanin is not a color. To truly understand the divinity that is, quote unquote, melanin, or dark matter consciousness, or the Seshet Kem-Ur, we must understand the metaphysics of form. Now, how does dark matter become form? Man, before anything was realized, Yeah, I got you. Before anything was realized of man, man was a proto-etheric seed of intent. A proto-etheric, in other words, it was the essential essence before The ether was created for man. It didn't just happen. It was part of the distillation process. That is imagined. The first 7 days of Genesis is how God imagined itself. In that process of involution, there was a realization. Now, you have never looked at this word and took the context to what it means. To realize. It should be real alive. To make tangible. To bring into existence. The Most High, in the first 7 days, remember I told you that, what was that? Genesis was the story of the involutionary properties of the mind of God, and Exodus was the evolutionary properties. So you had the yin, the yang, the chit and the chaitanya, the diverse, the inward and the outward. So when you understood or understand that man is God folded over on itself, that they say to you that from the darkness came the light, but they did not tell you that the light had to seek the darkness again to realize itself. Because if you go from one polarity to the next, you lose context with the balance necessary. So in corporeal matter, the light that came from the darkness that was the ignorance of God, which we turn factors as the evil that Lucifer came down to reveal. That light projecting from the darkness had to project back into darkness, so that dark matter had to consolidate itself into what we now recognize as man. So the only way for light to be used as a transportation system for consciousness growth means that it had to emulate the ignorance representative of the mind of God as perfection. And in that reflection, you now understand and understand that the ignorance had to be a component of man so that God could study and know itself. That's why Adam was kicked out of the garden and Eve stayed. Adam had to leave perfection. That's why you, as melanated people, had to leave the perfected state of instantaneous manifestation, which was one of the gifts of melanin, of instantaneous disappearing and reappearing, which was one of the gifts of melanin. We abused it. The prototype to melanin, in other words, was ideation. The prototype of melanin is ideation. Doesn't come from any sources, any vitamins, any proteins that they're going to study. Ideation created melanin. The very intent of the One Most High created melanin. You cannot study that. The only way is to be that. The prototype to melanin was ideation, and the framework that distinguishes it as a singularity apart from the all in all. This ideation, by its very opposition to the one, created a shell that encapsulated the idea or the intent. This first encapsulation was the boundary or framework that polarized chaos into an order that dictated instructions to the realms of matter. Melanin is the connecting point, the nerve system, the electrical conduits created for the transposition of consciousness. The eternal realm has no shadow outside of it because there is no outside. Understand now how the shadow was created and why the darkness and melanin. That is what we represent as the all in all and the absolute. And if that's the case, then you have to understand that if there is a realm of all light, that means that there is no shadow within. Obviously, all knowledge does not have a distinct opposite, because the shadow or anything reflected inside of it would mean that there was a duplicity. The absolute one day, however, and this has got to be story form because we could never contemplate the absolute's mind. We could only be that and then try to understand it. But in the story, we could say that the absolute one day perceived of an outside to itself, which was perceived as darkness because it did not recognize that. From this perception, a force was awakened in the darkness. You have absolute light over eternity, or the eternal realm. From the perception that the One Most High, the first Melanin, a force from that perception was awakened in the darkness. It perceived itself as something other than itself, and that perception distinguished itself from the One. The framework for that perception, that perceived distinction, that individualization, encapsulated the darkness, seeded it, and became the solution of mind that dimensionally manifests as the organizational intelligence science calls melanin. Let me say that again. Don't lose me. The framework for that perceived distinction, I'm taking you right back to God's mind. Your mind. The mind that created this madness, that encapsulated and invaginated chaos. The framework for that perceived distinction, that individualization, encapsulated the darkness, seeded it, and became the solution of mind that dimensionally manifests as the organizational intelligence science calls melanin. So anything that frames light into an individuate consciousness and intelligence must be considered melanin. Let me tell you that again, brothers and sisters. Anything that frames light or organizes individuate intelligence must be considered melanin. What is this definition we keep giving to it? The earliest form of humanity was ethereal, semi-substantive, with very little physicalized three-dimensional material in it. Check? We had etheric organs that represented the frequencies of the dimensions we occupied. The etheric framework, as subtle and as non-substantial as it was, still represented the organization of form. Are you with me? Listen to what I'm saying to you, brothers and sisters. When you were before this, the etheric framework, the non-substantial, that had the ideation encapsulated in this gossamer entity that we call the ethereal being, living in a whole other property of awareness. The very organizational factor to that entity being had to be melanin. To perceive of itself, this thing to perceive of itself on any level or dimension of existence, corporeal or incorporeal, there had to be a framework, a border, a threshold of distinction based on the organization of substance around this form. We keep talking about the fact that we were spirits flying around, and spirit is melanin. It would have to be organized if there is a corporeal body that is incorporeal, and it has organizational properties. Then the outline, the frame that gives substantive thresholds to this entity has to be organized of another property of melanin. Because for you to have form and to be substantiated, you have to organize that which is into the property of individuate intelligence. Thus, the spirit forms and the etheric forms were melanated creatures. Even if they were exuding light in different colors. Again, to perceive of itself, this entity on any level of dimension of existence, corporeal or incorporeal, there had to be a framework, a border.
Yes, sir.
The paper. Oh. There had to be a border or threshold of distinction based on the organization of substance around the form. Therefore, there was and still is in existence a proto-melanin. Again, a proto-melanin, or a etheric melanin, that is the archetype to the DNA, chromosomal, molecular, organizational intelligence that we identify as the pigment melanin. Think again. Go back to what I just said. There has to be a proto-melanin or an etheric melanin that is the archetype to the DNA, chromosomal, molecular, organizational intelligence that we here identify today as melanin. What is that thing? What is that thing that can go through walls? What is that thing that can organize molecular structure so that it can decorporealize, it can change, it can organize depending on the materials around it, depending on the consciousness that's motivating it, depending on the intent that frames it. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that your melanin is the escape hatch. Your melanin is the back door. Your melanin is the ticket out of this dimensional threshold. Your melanin is the key out of life code lockdown. Etheric man was a non-sexual and possessed one light processing instrument. At the beginning of your reality, you only had one eye. You had no distinct features. You glowed with perception. You saw based on feelings. You saw based upon knowing, not the two eyes that you now function with. These two eyes are the representations of what it is that matter is, the yin and the yang, the this and the that, the duality. In the realm of illusion and duality, polarity demanded, listen carefully, polarity demanded that melanin design the body temple to process both light and darkness, as God, by its perception of itself, as a distinction from itself, created both. Let me give it to you again. In the realm of illusion and duality, which we now occupy so happily, so blissfully, stupidly ignorant. In the realm of illusion and duality, polarity, once you start going down into matter, that which is the undiffusible light begins to spiral. And you can look at some good work by Drunvalo Melchizedek when he speaks about the flower of life. And he speaks to what your ancient Kemetic because that's who he studied to get this from. Understand that as light begins to diffuse, or it begins to have singularity of purpose, because light only becomes singular only after intent has been formed. And there are entities that live, higher beings that travel in creation with the ability to cast forth intent. Some are locked into the Father, Mother, Merkaba creation, others are not, as they told you in The Keys of Enoch, another book that was sponsored by Rockefeller. As you begin to go into this, you begin to see that as the spiral, as you go deeper into ultramatter, the spiral becomes larger. So as you get from a point, which is essentially all of what it is that you see creation, when you see that as the sun, I told you that the sun is essentially the youngest creation in existence. And as such, it is a codification of the intent for that particular galaxy. There are many different suns that triangulate certain and become relay stations for certain consciousness vectors, so that they pick up and relay information to the different solar systems. That is why you are here with a solar system inside here to match by affinity the solar harmonics of each one of the planets that go around your programming, the programming you call your sun. The harmonic set up is what's setting up the dynamics of you now listening to me. Where after 20 years, if I said this 20 years ago, you wouldn't know what the fuck I was talking about. From this point, as intent begins to make its journey to find itself, it goes to this point here, and then establishes itself according to the borders of its own realization. And from that point, it begins to cycle again, creating another circle. And the same thing happens to another circle until it's got this. And from this particular Merkaba vortex, this seed of life, comes the tree of life and the flower of life. And as we begin to spiral downward deeper into matter, it gets slower and slower. And therefore the illusion of duality takes place. Because now you're setting up the distinction. You think there's a distinction, but you're traveling all in one spiral. You're just going so damn slow, you think that this is that and that is this. But it's all one.